The air in this city still tastes like ash. Not literally, not the smoke of a fire, but the acrid residue of ambition burned to nothing, of trust incinerated. It's been years since I stood at the edges of power, felt the hum of DC beneath my feet, believed I was part of something important. Now I'm just Julian, the name whispered, with a dismissive shake of the head, the cautionary tale. I live a quiet life far from the capital's glow, the vibrant, ruthless pulse of politics. My days are long, often silent, filled with the ghosts of what I once was, what I thought I was becoming. There's a specific kind of agony in being accused of something you didn't do. Something that strikes at the core of your professional identity, your very character. It's not just the loss of a job or a career. It's the systematic stripping away of your reputation piece by piece, until you're left bare, exposed, and utterly unrecognizable even to yourself. I was branded unethical and trustworthy, a man whose judgment was flawed, whose morals were elastic. The words stuck to me like tar, suffocating me, defining me. I spent years in a fog of self-doubt, replaying every meeting, every conversation, every decision, searching for the moment I had gone wrong, the crack in my own foundation that allowed such terrible accusations to take root. The shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't shed. It warped my perception, made me distrust every kind word, every curious glance. I was a pariah, not just to the political establishment, but to myself. I remember the early days, the electricity of it all. Fresh out of grad school, a fire in my belly. I'd landed a junior position on a prominent Senate campaign. DC was a beast, vibrant and cutthroat, and I thrived on it. The strategy, the messaging, the late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and the belief that we were shaping the future. It was intoxicating. That's where I met Chloe. She was a few years ahead of me. Already a rising star, sharper than anyone I knew, with an uncanny ability to dissect a poll or craft a soundbite that cut through the noise. We started as rivals, a healthy competition pushing us both to excel. She had this way of looking at you, a glint in her eye that was either admiration or a challenge. I could never quite tell. But there was a camaraderie too, born of shared trenches and impossible deadlines. We'd bounce ideas off each other, argue fiercely over policy points, then grab a drink, laughing off the tension. I admired her drive, her meticulous nature, even her ruthlessness. It was a quality you needed in that city, I told myself. A necessary edge. I was good at what I did. I had a knack for connecting with voters, for translating complex policy into relatable stories. My ideas were getting traction, my name whispered in the right circles. I started leading small teams, then larger projects. Chloe was often there, a shadow in my periphery. Sometimes a collaborator, sometimes a competitor for the same project. She was always impressive, always polished. I saw her as a peer, someone who understood the unique pressures and exhilarations of our world. There were moments, fleeting at first, where I caught a peculiar intensity in her gaze, a flicker of something that wasn't quite supportive. When I achieved a success she was also vying for, she'd offer a congratulations that felt a little too tight, a compliment laced with a subtle barb. I remember one time I'd landed a major win for a candidate, and she'd pulled me aside telling me, "Julian, you really nailed that. Just be careful not to make it look too easy. People get jealous." I brushed it off, flattered, seeing it as a sisterly warning, a sign she cared. How naive I was. The whispers started subtly, like a faint rustling in the leaves before a storm. Small anonymous comments on political forums, a blog post here, a social media thread there, questioning my judgment on minor campaign decisions. At first, I dismissed them as the usual online noise, the occupational hazard of working in the public eye. Then, an article in an obscure online journal, referencing an unnamed source close to my campaign, hinted at improprieties in a local fundraising event I'd overseen. Nothing concrete, just insinuation, but enough to make my stomach clench. I pushed back, contacted the site. They pulled the article, citing editorial review. I thought it was over, but the seed had been planted. Colleagues started looking at me differently. A subtle shift in their smiles, a slight hesitation before accepting my ideas. I noticed I was being left out of certain strategy meetings, my input sidelined. I went to my boss, tried to explain, to reassure him. He was dismissive, told me it was just DC, people talk, keep your head down. I confided in Chloe, hoping for an ally. She listened intently, her brow furrowed with what I perceived as concern. She told me, "Julian, this city is full of vipers. You're too good, too open. You need to play the game smarter." She suggested I take a step back, let things cool down, advised me to be less visible for a while. It felt like good advice at the time, a veteran warning a rookie. But it was the first destabilizing event. the first brick pulled from my professional foundation, and she was the one handing me the trowel. The psychological pressure escalated, a slow, suffocating squeeze. The accusations grew bolder, more direct, and alarmingly specific. An anonymous tip to a major newspaper alleged I'd misappropriated campaign funds for personal use. A fabricated invoice circulated, crudely altered but believable enough to raise eyebrows. My phone rang constantly with reporters asking for comment, their voices laced with suspicion. Each denial felt weaker, each explanation more frantic. Because how do you disprove something that was never true to begin with? It was a phantom, an enemy I couldn't grasp. I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I'd done something wrong, that some hidden flaw in my character was finally being exposed. I became paranoid, checking over my shoulder, scrutinizing every email, every text. My colleagues retreated, their polite distance growing into outright avoidance. My mentors, who had once praised my potential, now offered only vague condolences, their eyes hinting at disappointment. The feeling of isolation was crushing. The walls of my office, once a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a cage. Then came the key moment of betrayal, the one that broke me. It started with a crisis on a major campaign I was managing. A series of incredibly damaging leaks emerged, exposing internal strategy documents and confidential voter data. The media went into a frenzy. The finger-pointing began immediately. I was scrambling, trying to contain the damage, working around the clock. In the midst of the chaos, Chloe, who was ostensibly helping on the crisis comms team, approached me. She looked distraught, her voice low with false sympathy. "Julian," she said, "I heard something, a whisper that it was you, that you were trying to undermine the candidate, to make a name for yourself by being the one who saved the campaign after sabotaging it." My blood ran cold. It was so outlandish, so viciously untrue, yet spoken with such conviction that for a terrifying moment I questioned everything. She continued, looking me dead in the eye, "I know you, Julian. You're ambitious. Sometimes ambition can blind us to consequences." It wasn't just the accusation. It was the way she delivered it, with a fake empathy that cut deeper than any venom. She gaslighted me, not directly about an event, but about my very character, suggesting I was capable of such profound deceit. She had taken every insecurity I'd ever had about working in that ruthless environment, every doubt I'd buried deep, and brought them to the surface. She made me wonder if I truly was the monster they were painting me to be. She then offered to help me draft a statement, to manage the narrative, but her suggestions were subtle manipulations designed to further incriminate me, to make me sound defensive and guilty. She spoke of owning my mistakes, of taking responsibility, even though I had nothing to take responsibility for. My mind, already frayed, began to warp under the pressure. I remember staring at my reflection in the dark office window, not recognizing the pale, haunted man staring back. My hands trembled constantly, a perpetual knot tightened in my gut. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded, each night a battle against racing thoughts and cold dread. My career didn't just end, it evaporated in a puff of scandal and shame, leaving behind only the stench of public condemnation. I resigned, a broken man, retreating from D.C. as if fleeing a plague. Years blurred into a monochrome existence. I moved to a small town far from the capital's shadow. The world I knew, the world I loved, had rejected me. I spent my days in a haze of regret and confusion, haunted by the what-ifs and the whys. I picked up odd jobs, anything to keep my mind numb, my hands busy. The self-doubt was a constant hum, sometimes a roar. Was I really that person? Did I subconsciously do something unethical? The public verdict had been so absolute, so damning, that a part of me, the part that craved validation, began to believe it. My friends faded away, unable or unwilling to stand by someone so thoroughly disgraced. My family, bless their hearts, stood by me, but even their unwavering support couldn't erase the bewildered hurt in their eyes. I was an empty shell, drifting. Then the anonymous tip. A single encrypted email arrived in an old forgotten inbox, dormant for years. It contained a fragmented screenshot of an internal email chain, sender unknown, recipients a list of burner accounts. The content was innocuous at first glance. A brief discussion about campaign strategy and media outreach for a rival candidate. But one line jumped out at me. A reference to Julian's file and a note about amplifying negative sentiment. It was vague, tantalizing, and sent a jolt of ice and fire through my veins. My hands, which had been numb for so long, started to tremble again. But this time it wasn't fear, it was a flicker of something long dormant. Righteous anger. The initial disbelief quickly gave way to a chilling recognition. This wasn't just a random act. This had the hallmarks of something carefully orchestrated. That night I couldn't sleep. The fragment burned in my mind. The next morning I dug deep into the forgotten corners of the internet, into archived news reports, political blogs, social media threads from years ago. I cross-referenced dates, searched for keywords, followed faint digital breadcrumbs. It started as a frantic, almost desperate quest, fueled by the slender thread of hope that I wasn't entirely crazy, that there was something more. What I found was horrifying. A network of fake news sites, thinly veiled propaganda outfits, all pushing similar narratives, attacking figures who challenged their chosen candidates. Social media bots, dormant now but active during my downfall, amplifying specific hashtags and spreading unsubstantiated rumors. The same pattern, the same tactics. And then the pieces began to click into place. A series of seemingly unconnected financial transactions, dark money flowing through shell corporations, eventually leading to a shadowy PR firm that had quietly popped up in DC a few years prior. The kind of firm Chloe had always talked about, the ones that operated in the gray areas, pushing boundaries. The closer I looked, the clearer it became. The anonymous blog posts, the unnamed sources, the specific language used in the accusations, it all coalesced around one person, Chloe, my former colleague, my rival, the woman who had pretended to offer solace, who had advised me to step back, to own my mistakes. She hadn't just stood by while I fell. She had meticulously, surgically orchestrated my downfall. It wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a shadow war, fought with lies and deception designed to eliminate a competitor. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs, my knees buckled. I stumbled back from my laptop, staring at the dimly lit screen, the incriminating evidence staring back at me. It wasn't just my career she'd destroyed. She'd stolen my identity, my peace of mind, my faith in the world. The shame I'd carried for years, the self-blame, transformed instantly into a white-hot rage, pure and unadulterated. My hands balled into fists, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. I wanted to scream, to tear something apart. The betrayal was so profound, so personal, that it felt like a violation of my very soul. I spent days in that initial shock, oscillating between bone-deep exhaustion and a manic energy. The past replayed in my mind, not as a confusing blur, but with brutal clarity. Every veiled warning, every tight smile, every subtly undermining comment from Chloe now made sickening sense. She wasn't a warning sister. She was a predator, meticulously setting her trap. The tears came, hot and furious, not just for what I'd lost, but for the years I'd spent believing I deserved it. For the self-flagellation, the isolation, the crippling fear. It was an emotional collapse, a breaking down of every wall I'd built to cope. But beneath the wreckage, a new, fierce resolve began to stir. The shame lifted, replaced by a cold, burning determination. This wasn't about getting my old life back, it was about truth. It was about standing up for myself, for the man I knew I was, against the monstrous lies she had woven. The victim within me died, replaced by a fighter. The fog of self-doubt evaporated, revealing a path forward, clear and brutal. I started methodically. I wasn't a forensic expert, but I knew enough about digital footprints, about the way campaigns operated, to know what I needed. I reached out to a former contact, a grizzled investigative journalist who had always believed there was more to my story. Even if he couldn't prove it, he put me in touch with a cybersecurity analyst, a quiet genius who could untangle the digital web of deceit. We worked in secret, building a case brick by brick, IP addresses, domain registrations, cross-referenced financial transactions, social media metadata. It was all there, a meticulously crafted but ultimately traceable paper trail leading directly to Chloe's operatives, her dark money networks, her bot farms. The evidence was undeniable. It was an elegant, horrifying tapestry of lies, woven with such precision it made me sick to my stomach. The idea of confronting her grew, taking root deep inside me. It wouldn't be a private confrontation. She had destroyed me publicly. I would expose her publicly. The high-profile political debate where Chloe was a featured pundit, her star shining brighter than ever in the DC firmament, seemed like the perfect stage. The irony was almost poetic. I prepared for weeks, rehearsing my words, fortifying myself against the fear that still gnawed at the edges of my resolve. My hands still shook occasionally, a phantom tremor, but my mind was clear, my purpose unwavering. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. The night of the debate was a blur of heightened senses. The lights of the studio, the buzz of the crowd, the smell of stage makeup and nervous energy. I was there, sitting in the audience, a face in the crowd, a ghost returned. Chloe was radiant on stage, articulate, confident, commanding. She spoke with conviction about ethics in campaigning, about the importance of integrity. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste in my mouth. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. When the Q&A session began, I stood up. My legs felt like lead, but I pushed through it. The moderator, a familiar face from my past, looked at me with a flicker of recognition, then confusion. "Julian," he said, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath. My voice, though a little rusty, was steady. I told them I had a question, not for the panel, but for Ms. Chloe Vance. A hush fell over the room. Chloe, caught off guard, blinked, her composure momentarily faltering, but she quickly recovered, a practiced smile on her lips. "Yes, Julian," she said, her tone cool, dismissive, as if humoring a disgruntled former colleague. I didn't let her finish. I pulled out my tablet, held it up for the cameras, its screen displaying a forensic analysis of a fake news site, IP addresses highlighted. I spoke of shadow campaigns, of dark money, of fabricated scandals designed to ruin careers. I laid out the evidence, piece by painstaking piece, connecting the dots live on air, my voice growing stronger with each word, each undeniable fact. I showed the email fragment, the full chain, her name on it. I showed the financial flows, the bot networks, the chilling precision of her deceit. The evidence, painstakingly compiled, flashed across the screens, undeniable and damning. Chloe's carefully constructed composure began to crack. Her face, usually so serene, flushed crimson. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, for a way to regain control. She started to interrupt, her voice rising, high-pitched and defensive. "Julian, this is absurd. You're grasping at straws. This is a pathetic attempt to—" My voice cut through hers, cold and hard. "This is the truth, Chloe. The truth you buried me under for years." And then I pulled up the final piece, a screenshot of a private message from one of her known operatives, directly referencing my name, referencing her specific instructions to destabilize my public image. Her composure shattered. Her voice devolved into a panicked, defensive fury, denying everything. But her frantic words, her wild gestures, only underscored her guilt. She lashed out, tried to discredit me again. But her words lacked conviction, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before a national audience. The mask slipped, revealing the ruthless ambition, the cold calculation, the depth of her deceit. The cameras captured every flicker of panic, every desperate denial. The studio was in an uproar. The moderator looked stunned. The world watched as Chloe Vance, the rising star, imploded. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The political establishment was rocked. Investigations were launched into Chloe's campaign practices, her network of dark money. The media, once complicit in my downfall, now swarmed around her, their headlines screaming betrayal. Chloe faced immediate professional repercussions. Her career vaporized just as mine had been. Public condemnation was widespread, her name now synonymous with corruption and deceit. For me, the vindication was profound, a cleansing fire. The truth had finally set me free. The psychological burden I'd carried for years, the shame, the self-doubt, dissolved into relief. I didn't get my old career back, not in the same way. The scars remained, a permanent reminder of the fragility of reputation, the cruelty of ambition. But I found a new purpose, a deeper one. I started working on campaign finance reform and media ethics, using my experience to shed light on the very tactics that had destroyed me. I counsel others who have been unfairly targeted, helping them navigate the treacherous landscape of online smear campaigns. My life is different now, quieter, yes, but richer in unexpected ways. I don't chase the bright lights of DC anymore. I don't crave the fleeting praise of the powerful. My purpose is clearer, my resolve unshakable. I learned that the hardest battles aren't always fought in the open but in the shadows of deception. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't about winning back what was lost, but about finding a new path, forged in the ashes of betrayal, leading to a freedom more profound than any ambition could ever offer. Air in this city still tastes like ash, sometimes, but now it's the ash of a past that no longer defines me. It's the scent of truth finally laid bare.